Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Myra Snell, a professor of math at Los Medanos College and co-founder and executive director of the California Acceleration Project. This is the third and final webinar in our fall series, which is titled Teaching Matters for Equity. And this webinar series was designed to support colleges in making good use of the $64 million that has been given to our colleges to support AB 1705 implementation and our work to achieve strong and equitable outcomes in transfer level English and math. In this webinar, we will learn about the Ascend professional development model and new research into its use in California community colleges as a strategy for creating classroom cultures that promote equity. Within the context of an Ascend community of practice, faculty learn evidence-based practices and test the impact of those practices by iteratively collecting disaggregated survey data from students about their classroom experiences. Now, for this particular webinar, we did have over 175 registrants, so we decided not to do the chat function today and instead resort to Q&A. If you haven't used the Q&A function in Zoom before, in the menu at the bottom of your screen, it's usually under More. You can click on Q&A. You're able to enter questions there, and the questions can be seen by our panelists today. If a question is answered in writing, the audience will see the question and the response. If the panelists choose to answer the question orally, then you will just see the question and hear the answer. The webinar is being recorded today and will be posted on the California Acceleration website. That's accelerationproject.org under publications. And it usually takes me a few days to get that done. So if you check back maybe midweek next week, you'll find not only the webinar recording, but the slides and all the resources that will be mentioned today. So we're going to begin today with the voices of two community college students, Sienna Bradford and Tanisha Tucker, who were in classes at Cypress College and Sacramento City College, where their instructors were participating in a community of practice that was part of the Learning for Equity Ascend Research Network that is the focus of our discussion today. So Mitch, I'll hand it over to you so that we can hear those students.
I do remember taking English reading with her. And let me tell you, I pick her for English all the time. I'm like, if you have another English class you're teaching, let me know. She is very well connected and she just wants her students to pass. And that to me is like a great goal to have. And I feel like any teacher or every teacher should have that goal for their student, is to pass. And she always reaches out, like if you need help, like if you need help with any homework, like if you have any questions, like here's my number, text me, email me, call me. And I think that is really like, it's like an eye opener. Like she really cares for her students. So I just love it. I love it.
In the past, I've taken different surveys for teachers' classes, and they'll read over the comments, but they don't really take it into consideration and actually apply it to class. In situations like some students will say that they don't feel safe or that they don't feel like that they belong. And most teachers kind of like overlook it and they don't really pay too much attention to it. Whereas Nora, she would take it into consideration and have us do a group activity to where we all feel like we belong and like we're important, and just to get everyone's perspective and just so that everyone can mingle and feel like we're here for a reason and that we're not alone. Definitely take account to what students are feeling. Not everyone looks what they look like. Just because they smile a lot doesn't mean that on the inside they're happy. Just because they look upset doesn't mean that they're a mad person. It just takes a little more opening up, a little more warming to get to know that individual. So definitely take account into how others are feeling, where they're at, and just here and there do a check-in or a checkup to see where they are mentally or where they are, just in the world. It makes a really big difference.
Okay, Claudia, now to you. Excellent. All right, so now introducing our panelists and presenters today. We have Dr. Claudia Escobar, who is a research associate at MDRC and was the former associate director at Wheelhouse, which is located at UC Davis and is a community college leadership and research organization. Also joining us is Kathy Wada, professor of ESL at Cypress College, and I view her as a leader at her college of equity efforts. And we have Dr. Norman Lorenz, who's a professor of education studies at Sacramento City College, who also falls into that category of someone who has led equity-based efforts at his college. All right, Claudia, shall we begin with your presentation?
Yeah, thank you. Here we go. So thank you so much, Myra, for putting this together. I just wanted to start with and just provide some context for today's discussion and share some background that highlights why this research and how the work that Kathy and Norman, along with their respective colleges, why that work matters. Higher education leaders increasingly recognize that inequitable academic outcomes result in part from inequitable classroom experiences, and that students of color and students with basic needs and security are also just less likely to experience classroom conditions such as identity, safety, and belonging that support academic motivation and persistence and success. And while better classroom experiences can promote equitable student outcomes, few faculty are actually trained to create these experiences systematically. And you might be wondering, so what is LEARN? The acronym stands for Learning for Equity Ascend Research Network. LEARN is a partnership between PERTS, Wheelhouse, Cypress College, and Sacramento City College. It may have morphed a little bit since this brief was released, but we could talk about that later. But just so you know, Wheelhouse actually supports community college leadership development and research that informs policy and practice within California. And PERTS is the Project for Education Research that scales. And it's a nonprofit research institute that helps educators apply evidence-based strategies to advance educational excellence and equity at large scale. PERTS is the organizer and purveyor of the Ascend experience, which includes providing the survey tool, the library of practice, and organizing cross-campus discussions among facilitators of this communities of practice and supporting community practice leads. And we'll get more into all of this, lingo that I just shared with you. But the goals of the research network and collaboration is to have participating faculty establish classroom learning conditions that are measurably more engaging and conducive to equitable student success. To also document the conditions, incentives, and supports that actually help faculty improve their teaching practice and therefore student experience in the classroom. And ultimately, we also just wanted to share lessons learned to improve implementation guidance and the scaling of a project across other colleges. And a lot of what we did was really learn about user experience, like how do faculty experience this tool? How can it be made better in order so that, we know that faculty are extremely busy and trying to give them the best experience possible and to lower the lift of learning how to use a new tool. So you might be wondering, what is Ascend and how does it work? Ascend is a data-driven professional learning program that enables instructors to learn how students are experiencing their classroom. The program provides faculty periodic feedback from their students along these several learning conditions, which I'll mention in the next slide. Feedback is disaggregated by key student groups, such as low and high financial stress, by gender, race, and this enables faculty to see both overall levels of these learning experiences that I'll describe, as well as differences in experiences by these different subgroups that I just mentioned. Faculty can then work to improve these learning conditions and address experience gaps during the academic term, as opposed to doing an evaluation at the end of the semester. And so once they get feedback, they're able to go into this library of practice and pick strategies to create and foster more equitable classroom learning experiences. In addition to faculty engaging in the survey, they also engage in the communities of practice, which provide a space for faculty to actually discuss the feedback that they gather from students and to learn about student-centered practices alongside fellow faculty. So really here, like the first step is that the educator administers a brief research-based survey to learn how students experience their course. They could do it anywhere from 2 to 4 times in a semester. At the time when we were doing the pilots that we'll get into, we were the guidance was to do preferably three times during the semester, with this idea that 2 points don't make a pattern, but if you have 3 points, you could probably see some amount of change in these learning conditions that were being measured. Step 2 is that once the students have answered the survey, there's a confidential report that gets generated and given to the instructor via the tool that summarizes student experiences in the classroom along these key learning conditions. In step 3, the instructor then learns relevant strategies through a practice guide with recommendations for creating more engaging learning experiences. And then in step 4, the faculty track improvement, as I mentioned, by repeating steps 1 through 3 through the semester. And then they're able to more or less see if they've been improving the student experience in the classroom. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the Q&A, because I know it might be a little abstract right now. But these, I've mentioned learning conditions and measures. These are the measures that that this instrument measures. And so you're looking at identity safety, social belonging, self-efficacy, institutional growth mindset, social connectedness, and trust and fairness. And so a student might see, or will see actually, for identity safety, I worry that people's evaluations of me will be affected by my group membership, race, gender, or class. In terms of self-efficacy, the student will see the item that says, I feel confident about my ability to do well in the class, and they will agree or disagree on a scale, and that will get rolled up into the report. This is just a description of the pilot to give you context before we jump into the brief and the findings. So the pilot was made up of Cypress College and Sacramento City College, and they piloted in the spring of 2022. At that point, 32 faculty from diverse disciplines, English, STEMs, health sciences, child development participated. More than half of the faculty, about 58%, implemented Ascend in an online course, 22% in a face-to-face course, and 25% in a hybrid course. But before we get into the findings, I just want to share that we had participating faculty complete a post-pilot survey, which is what generated the survey. And I also was part of the team that was observing the communities of practice, the cross-campus discussions, and the facilitators for each of these communities of practice across the different colleges. And these facilitators were also sharing reflections about how each of these group meetings were going, and then the findings are based on these sources of data. And I may have jumped the gun in the description, but these are the different data sources: the observations of the communities of practice, observations of the cross-campus discussions, and the facilitator reflections, and then this post-pilot survey. So before we get into the findings, I just wanted to see, hopefully someone can put the chat in the chat, maybe the Learn brief, in case people want to read the brief after this presentation, we'll put that in the chat. So let's just get into the findings. So one of the many exciting insights that we found was that around faculty's motivation to participate in Ascend. When we asked faculty in that post-pilot survey to share their motivations for engaging with Ascend, faculty selected an array of reasons as shown by this figure. So you could see here that an overwhelming majority were interested in improving their practice. The faculty wanted to create a more equitable learning environment. They wanted to better understand their students and to learn how to better engage and motivate their students, and to share with their students that they actually care by doing this. Faculty also signaled high levels of engagement with the Ascend experience through their use of the various components of the professional development program, including the number of survey cycles that they completed, the number of communities of practice meetings that they attended, and the use of the library of practice. So you can see here that 94% of the faculty who participated did completed 3 survey cycles during the semester. And in terms of the amount of time that they spent reviewing their actual results and their reports, about, I would say 50% spent anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, a small percentage spent 1 to 2 hours, and then 39% actually spent 30 minutes or less. And then in terms of, but before I get into the second finding, I want to also describe the communities of practice. And just so you know, the communities were spaces where instructors could collaborate and learn alongside their colleagues. The meetings were usually about an hour, and they convened 4 times during a semester, once before instructors started surveying students, and then after each survey cycle, they would meet again to talk about their results. Participants created a safe learning environment for each other, and a supportive environment that was, you could see, open dialogue and adoption of new ideas by collectively establishing community commitments. The meetings helped participants make sense of their reports and provide a space to discuss strategies that they were implementing and trying out in the classroom. And then, but equally important, I think they also, you have to remember that at this time we were during the pandemic. And so there was a lot of celebrating of progress when things were going well. And when people were learning what could be done better, then they were also sharing ideas with each other. So it was a very collaborative space that was created with the communities of practice. And you can see here that 53% of the faculty who participated attended all 4 meetings, and 33% attended 3 of the meetings. And I just included a nice quote about why faculty wanted to participate. So, one faculty shared, "I learn more when I collaborate with others, and I get so many ideas from seeing how other people implement strategies or address challenges." Some other reasons that faculty cited for being energized that emerged but are not listed in the slide include that faculty were able to share ideas, but actually, let me go on to the next slide. Faculty like the idea of sharing ideas and interacting with faculty outside of their disciplines. That might take people by surprise. Most people think, I want to work with the people in my department, but actually people, even though they were not completely sold at the beginning about working across disciplines, at the end of the pilot, people were like, this was a great experience to learn from what other people do in other disciplines. Faculty also commented on the value of connecting with colleagues who had a shared experience. Again, we were during the pandemic, so it was nice to have other people going through the process of transitions and learning what works best in this online environment. And they really also, faculty expressed that the opportunity to reflect on survey results with their colleagues was also a really valuable experience. We also found that faculty developed a greater awareness of students' needs. We asked faculty with a multiple choice question that allowed them to select multiple options, that regardless of what motivated you to use Ascend, what was the impact of using it over the semester? And what you can see here from the figure is that 86% cited showing students that they care as an impact, but also learning alongside their colleagues and these communities of practice. And they also shared gaining a better understanding of students and improving their practices, among the many other reasons. Along with developing greater awareness of student needs, faculty also shared implementing new classroom strategies. This quote, which is based on the observation of one of our facilitators leading a communities of practice, exemplifies this finding. And, it says, faculty definitely are looking at the data carefully in order to identify areas of improvement, and eagerly reviewed the data to see if there were changes. Based on my observations of the communities of practice and those of the lead facilitators, we noticed that faculty's increased awareness of the differences in student services across the learning conditions based on economic status. People were not surprised that students who were more financially stressed were actually having a harder time in classes, but it kind of just confirmed for them those suspicions. When we asked faculty to reflect on their user experience, faculty shared a willingness to use Ascend and the strategies in future classes. When asked for 1 or 2 new insights or practices they intended to carry forward in their work, some faculty cited the importance of working on student engagement and connectedness and social belonging. And again, this idea of belonging, a lot of the faculty actually gravitated towards one of the techniques in the practice, library of practice, which is a belonging story. And it's a short story that depicts previous students' challenges and concerns about belonging in the classroom and how they adapted, which has been shown to reduce academic outcome gaps for historically marginalized groups and minoritized students, women, and first-generation college students. Social connectedness here actually refers to the faculty's effort to help students connect and to get to know each other in hopes that they see each other as a resource. And I'll just continue going just for the sake of time. This is I just wanted to share another great quote that I think captures why faculty who participated in these pilots were open to using Ascend. And I think this idea of seeing real-time feedback really appealed to folks. Feedback about, the student experience in the classroom. They found that the survey tool was actually asking questions that they had not seen in other survey tools. And they also just wanted to be part of a work group with other faculty members to come up with solutions to make student experience better on their campus. One of the other findings is that compared to prior semesters, some faculty reported having greater engagement with students after using Ascend. You can see here, 14% said that they had more contacts with students, much more contact. 33% said more, and 50% said about the same, which I like to think of this as like an area of improvement where there could be some room to actually grow or lessen that category by having much more contact with students. The last insight that I'd like to share is that faculty viewed Ascend as a valuable tool for professional development and student success efforts. They found the survey tool to be an efficient and convenient way to gather timely student feedback. Again, this idea of timely student feedback comes back. That is actually actionable within that same term to change their classroom practices as opposed to trying to change it for the group that's coming. So faculty also expressed that they would implement strategies and insights gained in other future classes. And then the last thing I wanted to share is to highlight where faculty who participated in this pilot said that there was like room to refine the user experience. And some of the ideas that faculty expressed at the time were that they wanted better organization of the platform and the resources to be strengthened, especially for first-time users, which you could imagine that learning how to use a new tool and having all this information might be a large cognitive load. And so the faculty asked to find ways to strengthen the organization of the platform and the resources. And some of the improvements were actually made after the pilot. And I'm sure that there's been other improvements since I was last part of the project. Also, because first-time users can get mired in this implementation, like during the communities of practice, they can get mired in logistics and implementation. Some of the colleges actually decided to create different communities of practice where some communities of practice are for first-time users and some are for returning faculty. And that was another improvement that was kind of generated from that user experience research that we were doing. Some faculty also implemented the survey in small classes and were unable to see the results by these smaller subpopulations for confidentiality reasons. If more than less than 5 students of a particular group is represented, then we wouldn't show that particular learning condition in order to protect the confidentiality of students. Anyhow, so what happened is that the faculty expressed a need to actually let faculty know who have small classes to be aware that this might be the case for you if you have a small class. To further improve user experience, faculty also asked that we find ways to gather and share best practices that lead to high survey response rates among students, which I think has also been captured. And faculty also asked that we find ways to add clarity for faculty, that the survey data is for faculty eyes only. We saw a lot of faculty in the communities of practice. It took a little bit of while, but trust was built, and faculty were able to feel comfortable about sharing, if they felt like sharing their results with their colleagues. In terms of scaling, faculty also provided the following ideas to help increase user adoption, which is to partner with colleges that have, strong professional development infrastructure at their colleges, and to figure out ways to have more faculty buy-in on student success and equity initiatives to enable sustainability and integration of Ascend over time. And finally, some faculty wanted to see some of this data that is collected being linked to outcomes data to learn if there are any relationships between the outcomes and the learning conditions that were being measured. So I will stop there and stop sharing. Would you like me to stop sharing, Myra?
Yeah, I think we're ready to move to the Q&A, so we
Yep.
can, yeah. Okay. And then Mitch, I think if you could spotlight the panelists in addition to Claudia and myself. So Claudia, while we're getting set up for the panel, that was an amazing amount of information, very concisely, beautifully delivered. So I want to step back for 1 second before we enter into talking with the community college faculty that we have with us today. If you were to step back and talk to me on an elevator at a conference, what is sort of the one big takeaway for you from the perspective of a researcher in doing this project?
I think I would say that the aha moments that I saw within the faculty in the communities of practice, just the increased awareness and the ability to then access a library of practice that matches the survey results that are being received. I don't think that I've seen that aspect of a tool in a way that is useful in that way. And I do think that there is still the possibility of being able to tie the learning conditions data to other outcomes, but I do think that has to be done thoughtfully by the college, and with all of the kind of caveats that could go with that type of research. But I think faculty just found it really useful, and I think, and Kathy and Norman could probably talk to this, about the importance of trust, that faculty also just need to trust, and that takes time too. You can't strong arm someone to trust the process. You kind of just have to demonstrate that there's good intentions for wanting to do this type of work, and that it's tied to students. So that was probably a really long elevator ride. But
well, I thank you for that. I want to ask you one more. This comes from Saab at College of the Canyons, and it's related to a question that I wanted to ask you also. He's saying that communities of practice can obviously have positive impacts, but he's wanting some specific ideas for best practices that are discussed in these communities. And the way that I would phrase that question, if you're comfortable, we could leave this to Kathy and Norman, is to talk for a minute about the library of practices that you mentioned. I noticed when you talked about the belonging story, you mentioned research that was connected to, that particular strategy had a research base around improving students' belonging, sense of belonging in the classroom. So do you want to say a few words about the library of practice, or do you want to leave that for Kathy and Norman?
Yeah, I'll say just briefly, everything that's in the library of practice is research-based and evidence-based. I during my doctoral studies, I studied a lot of that information, and I always thought, how will this get packaged? Like, these insights where people have done research, either, just different types of randomized control trials of these types of interventions. And I was like, how will this ever get packaged, and will this see the light of being like some people actually using it? And I think the Library of Practice does that, which is there's actually a lot, everything that's in there is actually, you can find several studies to support why each of those strategies could work. So.
And they're sort of grouped, the strategies are grouped by those domains that you shared.
Exactly,
So,
exactly,
okay,
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Feel free to contribute as we move into talking with Kathy and Norman. I wanted to start, Kathy and Norman, with just hearing a little bit from you about what motivated you to participate in and to actually lead an Ascend community of practice at your college.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, okay. What motivated me was that our college has been doing a lot of really good equity work. And we've done a curriculum audit and these types of, growth mindset academy. And there's just been a lot of equity work that's been done at the college. And for me personally, being involved in it, it was very enlightening. When I revised my syllabi, I was like, this is so cool, and made me feel really good and made me feel very forward thinking and student centered and all of that. But what I realized at a certain point was, this makes me feel good, but how is it impacting my students? So I think with having Ascend, what's wonderful is that I can survey the students that are with me for the semester, and then I can get their feedback and then make changes to serve this same group of students that's with me. So I think that was one of the main reasons for me to get involved. I think also like the Library of Practice, I just don't have time to dig into research that works. I don't have time to attend every single conference I just don't have time. So to have research that's curated, that connects to the Ascend categories is just so helpful. That was probably my main reasons.
Thank you for that. Norman, did you want to add?
Sure. First of all, Myra, thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of this presentation through your project, because what it does is enlightens other colleges to this activity. And this activity has changed the trajectory for us at Sac City College. I am the former director of professional development for over 8 years. And in 2012, when California launched the first Student Success Act that we now call SEEP, it was an opportunity to bring forward the query of how to equitize education for community college students. And one of the probably strongest trajectory changes was bringing in Dr. Frank Harris and Dr. Luke Wood, who ran their institute in San Diego. And Dr. Luke Wood, in fact, now has become the president of California State University, Sacramento. So it really is glowing. I actually live next door to Sac State. So you hear the cheers constantly on what he's brought to Sac State. What really chose, for me, the choice was exactly as Kathy said, to be able to identify student feedback in a way that addressing Saab's question integrated with it was the fact that to refine more greatly the concept of best practice was to make a choice about effective practice and teach to the affect, because the attitudes of our students, based on what Claudia shared, mostly looking at disproportionately identified learners, as well as high financial stress, were the pieces that did not necessarily connect to our overall scholarly academics. It was things outside of the college that was creating a lack of persistence. And when you have the opportunity to create efficacy in an organization by building community, that was the true declaration for me that I wanted to use this in an ongoing way. And what that has shown for our college, even up to this current semester, is that we are in an area of about 85% communication fidelity, which again, as the tool talks about, my instructor will try to use my answers to this survey to make class better for me. And at an 85% marker, we actually made 2 points this very semester. So when you think back to as long as we've been institutionalizing this, by building these communities, it's working and the needle's moving.
Okay, thank you. I think I followed all of that. I get a sense from listening to you, Norman, that this is part of an ongoing effort at your college, and that you as a facilitator have markers that are sort of helping you assess whether or not students are getting benefit from their interactions with faculty in the classrooms that are using this. I think that's really exciting. I think that Kathy and Norman, I'm going to skip to the third question that we had written on our little list. And this is coming from someone who is math faculty, so bear with me. When I look at the ascend domains, they're the things like Norman was talking about that are affective, right? They are about social belonging, identity, safety, social connectedness, self-efficacy, institutional growth mindset, truth and fairness. And these are things that as math faculty, I would not know how to assess or quite frankly think much about when I'm teaching. I sort of think about who's participating, who's not, who do I need to encourage to do their homework in a timely fashion, et cetera. Those kinds of things that are not connected to the domains that are described here. So what I wanted to have each of you give us a window into is that when you're giving a survey that takes a measurement of students across these domains and disaggregates it by various student demographics, I am wondering how this influenced you personally in the way that you relate to your students and what you do in your classes. And if you could give us a specific example, I think that would help me. So Kathy, shall we start with you?
Sure. One of the specific learning conditions that I found was low was that sense of social belonging. So for my students, what that told me is, although like one of the students said, you don't always know from the outside what they're actually feeling on the inside. My students seem perfectly content in the classroom, but then in surveying them, I realized, they feel content, but they don't necessarily feel like a sense of belonging, like I belong here. So for me personally, I did that belonging story. And I used the library practice. What's great about it is that it's not just, here, do your belonging story and good luck, but it gives you checklists. It gives you areas to watch out for. Did you hit this pitfall? Because that probably communicates the wrong message to students. And I just use a checklist and try to refine my belonging story. And my belonging story was related to the first essay that I did when I went to UC Irvine, was that I got a D on it. And I was devastated because I had never gotten anything lower than like a A on any writing ever. But I used the same technique that I used in high school, which was do it at the last minute and then run and turn it into class. And I realized that, maybe that's not the most effective. So I talked with my professor, kind of fessed up about the process and realized, I think I need to use a different process. So, without telling that to students, they were shocked. I mean, when I asked them, what grade do you think I got? They're like, did you get a B? And I'm like, no, I got a D, and just gasp, like, what, how is that possible? You're teaching us English, you got a D, but I told them how that helped me. And I think for many of them, it gives them a sigh of relief, that failure is not permanent. she got a D, and look, she's a teacher, and she found different strategies and she succeeded. So that's one way that I personally have used Ascend to refine the practices in my classroom.
Thank you for that wonderful example. Norman, do you have something to share along those lines?
Could you repeat the question again?
Sure. As a math faculty person, these domains look pretty out there. So I wondered if you could just give an example from your own practice, like Kathy did with the belonging story, of something that you learned from your student surveys relative to these domains in a strategy that you tried.
Sure. So being a part of the People and Society meta major, I teach human development, early childhood, elementary education studies. And one of the things that I feel was prominent in allowing me to integrate these in my learning environment was first meeting with my faculty, my fellow faculty members, because part of creating an interdisciplinary approach, and I know that this started out by looking at English language arts and mathematics because of the movement from the basic skills initiatives, was to lift these students up. But what happened for me, at least, was listening to my math instructors' peers and hearing them say, oh my gosh, you do those things in the class. And, you know, we label buildings. This is the math building, this is the science building, this is the language building. And what the community of practice has done has brought all of us together, that we all instruct uniquely, but it's about relationship. And for us, our college, we had belonging certainty. That was the area that we focused on because it was the lower of the percentiles based on student surveying. And so when we all came back together, we talked about how that connects with the dashboards at the college in relationship to success rate. And so each of us implemented that while also looking then at our own learning conditions. And we talked about that, all of us, with our student population. And that's really what created, for me, I was looking at in our class, in one of my classes, self-efficacy, but it obviously had a connection with belonging certainty, which is about social belonging, exactly what Kathy spoke about. That's where I think the rubber hit the road for me, was to meet together. And again, as Claudia said earlier, that establishing the level of trust with your peers was the way in which we entered into developing stronger trust with our students.
So I think that's a good segue into the conversation I'd like to have now, which is about your roles as facilitators of these communities of practice. And I'm going to sort of jump to number 5 on our list. I'll say that I've led a lot of professional development during my 33 years as a faculty member, and it can be intimidating. Particularly when you're dealing with sensitive subjects or when you're trying to introduce new ways of hearing your students, right, and understanding their experiences in your classroom. And I think that it can be a difficult role to play. So what I'd like to hear you reflect on a bit is, can you just give us a sense of what the community of practice was like? Like, what was a typical meeting? What kinds of support did you have to provide? Was there support within the larger Ascend community for you as a facilitator? So I'd like to just hear a little bit about what you each experienced as a facilitator and the kinds of things you did in the community of practice. So Kathy, shall we go back to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think if I were to implement Ascend on my own and try to lead a community of practice on my own without the support of Learn and the Ascend Facilitators Network, I would be floundering. But, you know, with the community of practice, as a facilitator, we were given an agenda and an idea of what to cover, what questions faculty might ask, how to go through the reports and handle those kind of touchy situations where, it is a pretty vulnerable state when you think you're doing such a great job and maybe the student feedback doesn't align with that, and you think you're doing such a great job but the percentages of this area or that area just don't align. It can be a bit devastating as faculty, right? It kind of wounds our faculty pride. So what is so helpful with the communities of practice was having those agendas to begin as a guideline, being able to meet with other faculty who are facilitators, and be able to kind of brainstorm in advance how to facilitate that. So we were never like alone. Typical meeting for us at Cypress was about an hour. And because we had the general agenda plotted out, or at least the high areas that we want to kind of cover, that's how we did it. Sometimes we would just toss a lot of the agenda items to the side, especially when faculty were being very reflective and digging into the whole purpose of what Ascend is, as opposed to just trying to we got to move on to the next agenda item because we have to cover all of this. So, I think as the semester went on, the sharing became more real, became more authentic. And then I think also faculty became more and more willing, in that kind of safe space to just say, yeah, I am really struggling with this. And I don't know how to improve this metric, and I tried it and it failed. And so I'm going to try something different. So all of those things, I think put together made the community of practice very, very rich.
Thank you. Norman?
I would certainly concur with what Kathy said. The opportunity, as I said earlier, to come together as a faculty and build a mechanism of trust was that we looked to the learning conditions of Ascend and we built trust and fairness in our own community. And in doing that, kind of in a bifurcated way, offering it to students, but also offering it to ourselves, was a place of comfort that we all came together. We certainly had an agenda, but very flexible to it. Eventually, as Kathy said, what began to occur was, I want to show my graph. I want to get some feedback from you, right? And so that interdisciplinary approach, which again began because we needed to really lift up language arts, writing and reading scores, and math computation and outcomes. But what happened was those still exist, with the understanding that the human condition elements are at the foundation of these learning conditions. And when we practice them, we're much more able to, in some ways, demonstrate a vulnerability because of our confidence that we have trust with one another, and therefore the students trust us more greatly, and they're willing to take greater risk. I've had just in this past 2 weeks alone, one unhoused student who came directly to me needing intervention, 2 students that needed financial aid redirection that we were able to connect to our counseling, right? So just in those 3 examples alone, just this week, and we're in week 10, right? And things happen, and yet all 3 of those students are staying enrolled in their education. And I don't know necessarily that Ascend, if we hadn't used it, in one of those cases was another professor who literally said to me, well, I'm not familiar with those resources, and that's not really my job, but I thought I should check in with you. And I said, of course we have those. Those are under student services, and we need to contact X, Y, and Z. And he's like, really? We can do that? I'm like, of course you can do that.
So
it's been a very enlightening experience.
So one of the things that I'm hearing in both of your remarks is, and I meant to ask this earlier, when you're using this tool in the classroom, or when you're working with faculty and talking about the use of the tool in the classroom, Are you presenting this to students as sort of a collaborative inquiry into their experiences? Or, I'm going to give you a survey, we're going to ask you questions, and then I'm going to come back and try some things. Are you having that kind of a conversation with the students?
I definitely am. I show them the actual document that when you click on our data, I mean, again, and the data is anonymous, so they don't know who said what. And so being able to demonstrate that to them while also looking at the conditions, it's the document that does the practices, which comes from the College Transition Collaborative. I actually share those with, I run professional learning communities in my own class. And so each of them gets the opportunity to look across these 7 areas, and they question each other. And what I've watched strengthen is the interpersonal connection that students have with one another, which is priceless.
Kathy, is it the same for you? You talk to your students about this as a process you're using to
yes,
improve your
definitely.
teaching?
I definitely talk to them about it. I really try to emphasize this is more of an evaluation of me and what I bring to the classroom and the environment I'm creating for you all to be successful in this class. It's really about me. It's not about you, but I need your feedback because you're the students in the classroom. So I try to frame it that way, just so that there's not that fear, like, is this sort of a backhanded quiz of some way? And, she says she won't see it, but will she see it? Will she know it's me? And so I kind of explain that all of that, because, I let them know, like, please answer the questions, but I also tell them, please also where there's open space, please type in additional, comments, because I love to read those, whether they're good or bad or whatever. I just really love that additional feedback from you all, because you are very important to me as a faculty member.
That must just blow students away. I mean, I think we heard that in one of the opening comments from one of the students, is that that she'd been faculty give surveys. She never thought they did much with them, or at least it wasn't visible to her. And then now in this situation, it was clear that her instructor was reading these things, using the results, trying to design group activities that opened up conversation in the classroom. So it was obvious to her, right, that this was a different type of surveying for a different purpose. I think that's really a lovely aspect of this.
And we can also illustrate that to them in the newest renditions of the graphs, because the communication fidelity says just that more than 85% of our student population right now in these 30 sections of courses are listening to you. And you see the differences as we disaggregate across gender, basic needs, and race and ethnicity.
So this thing you're talking about is a tool that faculty see, that they then can say, hey, look at this, right? This is what we're monitoring as faculty to make sure what we're doing is effective. Wow, I think that was so great. All right, we have about...
And that's again where Kathy talks about the fact that it's our evaluation, but we're working with you as a team to bring together a confluence so that we can all be successful.
Yes, so well said. All right, we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to get to question 8 on the list that I'd sent you, which is advice that you have for initiating an Ascend community of practice at your college and for scaling it as a strategy for fostering equitable outcomes for students. So can you say in these last 5 minutes we have together a little bit about how you're getting faculty engaged in this, and are there incentives, and is it part of a larger college strategy around equity? And I'll go back to you, Kathy.
Sure. Yeah, we don't have it fully institutionalized yet. However, our campus has been very supportive of the efforts. We've been able to secure student equity and achievement funds in order to compensate the faculty who participate, a nominal amount, and have a day of reflection, meal together and things like that. And so that's been really, really good. I think the best way to institutionalize it, however, would be to provide support for faculty to participate. Like, I think colleges need to identify what are the values of the college. And if the values of the college are to improve equity for our students, then let's put that into action by supporting initiatives and activities such as this, right? So many of our faculty are doing this out of the goodness of their heart because they're interested, but I think that colleges could do more in that sense. I think we're trying to get ascend as part of like salary advancement, where so you can earn, units in that way. We're running into some roadblocks, and at least in some areas, the distinction between what full-time faculty can do versus adjunct faculty can do, that's a district barrier in some places. So I think that's, but definitely want to connect it more with our professional development and have a more regular, systematic way for faculty to participate. I just can't do that on my own. That's really hard.
Yeah. Norman, do you have anything to add on that?
I would equally say we did secure seed funds for a stipend over the semester for those that choose to participate. We're primarily focused on our first year experience, which is the incoming freshman class that many colleges have begun to offer. That's where the demonstration offers us enough advancement to where we're partnering with Ascend to connect our data with our data dashboard. I work on the research advisory committee to discuss that and update them. The president's cabinet has been made aware. So we're slowly scaling it because it's demonstrating to the college that our data in Ascend is connecting to the disaggregation of student success, where it relates to success rate and persistence to the next semester.
That's fabulous. All right, we are almost out of time and I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to ask Claudia if she has any closing comments she would like to make about the report that you've done and the work with Ascend and the community colleges.
Yeah, I actually, as I was listening to the different exchanges, I thought that would something that's important to kind of not lose sight of. We talk a lot about equity, we talk a lot about sense of belonging, all of these different, you can get lost in the logistics of things. I think at the end of the day, what I see as helpful is creating environments in which students feel comfortable asking for help. And so, and it's really simple. Like, it's simple if you think about it that way. And the measures talk to that, which is if people feel like they belong, that they are part of the college, that they are meant to be there, they will ask for help. If they feel that their identity is safe, that they won't be judged for asking for help. And it all feeds into self-efficacy at the end of the day. And really, and again, that trust, all of those pieces. And so, if you walk away with anything today, it's creating an environment in which students can actually ask for help. They feel comfortable.
I think that's a great way to close our time together today. So thank you everyone for attending. Materials will be posted on the CAP website, accelerationproject.org, under publications within a week. And I want to thank again the panelists that we had here today and Claudia for doing this research. I really enjoyed the conversation and I'm inspired by the work that Kathy and Norman are doing at their colleges. So I hope everyone has a good weekend.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Should we stay on for a bit, Myra? Or
I think Dave maybe had suggested we do that.
Okay.
Dave, did you want to?
I mean, I
We-
just wanted to say, I always find that helpful to just leave time just in case, things go over or anything. And also, mostly, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for doing this. It's really fantastic. Just really appreciate you. It's always great to hear you answer these questions, and you think so thoughtfully about these things. So just lots of appreciation. That's all I got.
It's really wonderful to work with PERTS, and I truly think that part of what you're doing in the project that you've shared out with many others today, Myra, is something that we really need to plug into all 117 colleges. And, it's a platform that will build a trajectory of change for our students. The first briefing has already proven it. And as we continue to do that and enlighten new faculty to the table, will shift the level of our community of students, because they're the next generation to our workforce. And plainly, for the ones that are not experiencing it, I'm duly concerned. And I think that we can certainly assert a greater effort at launching this in a way that I think helps faculty reevaluate their commitment to the community college student.
I think it's such a concrete way, like Kathy was talking about, where they've already done the curating and we have a normed survey, and all the sort of big dots have been connected.
Yes.
And it makes it so much easier to use it. I was thinking about our first webinar we did in this series was a very large math study that was done across 4 community colleges in California. And they found that they were looking at success rates in transfer level math and what factors explained student success. And it turned out that who you have as your teacher is the factor that is predictive of a student's success. In fact, it explained 2 times more of the percentage of variation in student success than students' prior math preparation. Yeah. And then they went on and analyzed syllabi in addition to some survey data from faculty, and found that there were certain instructional practices that correlated with more equitable outcomes in transfer level math. And one of those was fostering belonging. One of them was around transparent and growth-oriented assessment and grading practices. So as I looked across what that study showed, and I looked across the domains in PERTS, I'm like, I think here we can begin to connect the dots from very compelling evidence that what we do matters, and giving math faculty in particular, because I think we're a little behind the curve, speaking as one of that community myself, in really knowing how to have concrete tools, and if we're skeptical, being able to read the research behind it to motivate us to try some new things that feel maybe squishier or than we would be used to doing in the math classroom. So I do feel I'm probably going to do a newsletter where I'm trying to connect these dots more solidly. And if I get that done, it'll probably be I'll be sending that out maybe in late January, early February, and I might contact you and ask you for some quotes or reflections that I can include in that if you're willing. But I do think that's one thing that makes me so excited about this. It's a very concrete way to connect the dots between what we know we need to be doing and how to do it, right?
Yeah, and we didn't get to your question, Myra. We didn't get to your question 6 about how it could resonate with math faculty. So I was thinking about that because I'm not, math faculty, but I was thinking that, and it's probably touches what you talked about is just, what is the perspective of faculty when they're faced with the new semester of students? Like, is it, hey, welcome, by week 12, like half of you are going to be gone. The
Yeah.
other 25%, you're going to have C's and almost be like scraping by. So welcome. Let's get started with chapter 1. So are they
It's
conveying
almost
that
like hazing. I almost feel like math classrooms are like hazing environments, like you get in and we're going to put you through a bunch of, pretty painful experiences and see who's left at the end, and you're the deserving, right? That's
Yeah.
what I feel like often when I'm in math classrooms. I just feel like
Yeah.
they are not the kind of environments that I'm listening when I listen to the two of you talk about the kinds of environments we're trying to create.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Kathy, but
Oh
it
no,
was resonating.
what I was going to say, because my dad was a math teacher for all of his career, and I think that in the heart of hearts of math faculty, they actually do believe in the growth mindset in terms of effort and practice. It makes a huge difference. Otherwise, why would they assign those 50 homework problems, only the odd? Like if they didn't believe that students
Right.
could achieve success in math with practice, and not just based on talent, they wouldn't do that. So I think in their heart of hearts, they actually do affirm it. But I think maybe the way some things are kind of framed, like you say, a little more squishy, then it makes them a little bit more uncomfortable. But that by practice, I think they're demonstrating a lot of what they actually believe, but maybe how they communicate with that to students could be improved.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'll use the analogy that one of our math professors, who's exquisite in transforming his math class, said, I live in the left brain, Norman, and you as a people and society person in psychology and sociology, you live in the right brain. And I think there are times where you'll need to invite me to the right brain invitation. And then there are times where I will invite you into the left brain. And together we'll find a blend. And that's really a beautiful analogy from a neurologically diverse perspective, because talk about the curriculum of what's typical and the transformational changes that are occurring in math classes all over the country.
I just realized that I might have recorded this whole conversation.
Oh, yes.
So I'll make